Everyone calls Deku weak because he cries. But if your definition of strength falls apart the second someone shows emotion, maybe Deku isn't the weak one. Everyone else froze. Deku had nothing. No quirk, no plan, no chance. And he still ran in to save the guy who bullied him every day of his life. People see the tears, they miss the courage. Because My Hero Academia was never about power. It was about the qualities that make someone worthy of it. And from the very first episode, Deku already had those qualities. Deku was never weak. You just missed the point. Let's be fair. The criticism didn't come from nowhere. Deku cries. A lot. He panics. He overthinks. He stutters. He doubts himself. He isn't naturally charismatic. He isn't intimidating. He can feel strangely fragile for a shonen protagonist. And that's exactly why some people just bounce right off of him. Because when someone imagines strength, they imagine confidence, certainty, control, the person who walks into the room and immediately takes charge. Deku rarely looks like that. Instead, he looks scared. And for a lot of viewers, looking scared and being weak become the same thing. But they're not. And that's where the misunderstanding begins. The truth is that this conversation really isn't about Deku. It's about us. Anime has trained us to associate strength with a very specific image. A stronger character is calm, stoic, confident, unshakable. They don't cry, they don't hesitate, they don't let people see them break. Across anime, we've been taught that what strength looks like is Gojo, Levi, Sungjin Woo, Thorfinn. Hell, even Asta looks strong, and he's about 5 feet tall. Whether it's confidence, aggression, stoicism, discipline, or sheer force of will, anime has taught us to recognize strength on sight. That's the image we associate with strength. And the longer we've consumed stories like that, the more natural it feels. So when Deku shows fear openly, people interpret it differently. Not because he's experiencing emotions nobody else experiences. These are all emotions that I'm sure the majority of people watching this video experience. It's because he's showing emotions that most protagonists hide, and that's an important distinction. Deku isn't the only shonen protagonist who's scared. He's just one of the few who lets you see it. Think about the moments people criticize. The crying, the panic, the self-doubt, the anxiety. Those aren't signs of weakness. They're signs of honesty. Most heroes feel fear, both in My Hero Academia and in the real world. Deku just doesn't pretend like he doesn't feel the fear, and somehow that's become a flaw. The irony is that some of Deku's most courageous moments happen during the exact moments people criticize. The crying, the panic, the self-doubt, the anxiety, those moments don't make him weaker, they make his choices more meaningful, because courage isn't the absence of fear, it's action despite fear. And that's what most people miss. They're judging Deku on how he feels instead of what he does. When the sludge villain attacks Bakugo, Deku isn't fearless, he's terrified. He runs forward anyway. Later when All Might asks him why he did it, Deku doesn't give a speech about justice. He doesn't talk about heroism. He doesn't talk about destiny. He simply says, "My body moved on its own." That's the moment All Might chose its successor. Not because Deku was the strongest person in the room, but because he was the most heroic. And later in the show, that's when something fascinating happens. The same audience that spent years calling Deku weak suddenly starts calling him cool. Vigilante Deku. The dark costume, the tired eyes, the intimidating aura. People loved it. And honestly, so did I. But the reason is worth examining. Because Vigilante Deku isn't any stronger than the Deku that came before him. He's not braver, he's not more heroic, he's not more self-sacrificing. He's always been those things. What changed? The presentation. The tears disappeared, the vulnerability disappeared, the fear became internal, the suffering became quieter, and suddenly people started calling him strong. But Vigilante Deku isn't a power fantasy. He's a tragedy. He's exhausted, he's isolated, breaking himself apart, trying to save everyone. The most ironic part of the entire arc is that the moment people start seeing Deku as strong was the moment he was arguably at his lowest. People didn't fall in love with a stronger version of Deku. They fell in love with a version that suffered silently instead of honestly. And I think that says something. Not about Deku, but about how we define strength. Because when Class 1A finally catches up to him, the story doesn't treat his isolation as admirable. It treats it as a mistake. A hero who believes he has to carry everything alone. A hero who has forgotten that he deserves help too. Even heroes need saving. Especially heroes. I don't think that My Hero Academia is telling a story about becoming strong. It's telling a story about what strength actually is. The power matters. The fights matter. The victories matter. But those aren't the qualities that made Deku worthy of One for All. So what did? My Hero Academia answers that question in episode 2. A powerless kid saw someone in danger and ran forward. That's it. That's the answer. It's that simple. Not power, not talent, not confidence, not fearlessness. The instinct to help someone even when you're scared. Everything else is built on top of that foundation. The quirk didn't create the hero. The hero earned the quirk, and that's why the ending works. Because when Deku loses One for All, he doesn't lose the one thing that made him special. The power was never the point, the character was. When he had no quirk, he chose people. When he gained power, he chose people. When the world gave him every reason to become colder, harder, and more ruthless, he chose people. Again and again and again. Because My Hero Academia was never about power. It was about the qualities that make someone worthy of it. Courage, compassion, self-sacrifice. The instinct to help someone even when you're afraid. The kind of instinct that makes your body move before your mind can catch up. Those are the things that made Deku worthy of One for All. And they're the things that he still has after it's gone. That's why Deku matters. Not because he's the strongest, not because he's the coolest, but because from the very beginning he showed us something most people mistake for weakness. Vulnerability, fear, compassion, and the courage to move forward anyway. Deku was never weak. He was the only one strong enough to stay kind, and that kindness rubbed off on others.